Wear it, he said. Nora Bell had walked into the Rosewater Hotel to give a ring back, not to be handed a reason to keep it. She stood in the cool marble hush of the lobby, with her hand open between them, the little velvet weight of the thing sitting in her palm like something that had wandered a long way to be lost, and the man in front of her folded her fingers gently closed over it. "I don't understand," she said. "You don't have to." His voice was low, careful, the voice of a man used to being overheard and choosing his words the way other people chose their steps on wet stone. "Not today. Just put it on." Please, behind him, a ceiling fan turned slow circles through the warm salt air, drifting in from the open terrace doors. Somewhere out past the boardwalk, a gull complained. Her thumb found the old rose gold band through the velvet and pressed, and she felt the small, hard star of the stone, and she thought, quite clearly, that nothing about this day had gone the way an ordinary week was supposed to go. That morning it had. The morning the ring came into her life smelled of hot linen and sea, which was how most July mornings smelled inside Bell and Daughter. The narrow alterations shop Nora kept wedged between a fudge kitchen and a shuttered bait store on Harbor Lane. The fudge kitchen was the reason her whole shop smelled faintly of burnt sugar by 10 a.m. The bait store was the reason the rent was cheap. Nora had learned to be grateful for both. She had the front windows propped with the same two flatterns her grandmother had used, and the ceiling fan going, and a wedding gown pinned to the dress form like a patient mid-surgery when the courier's van pulled up outside and honked twice. "He honks," June said from the pressing table, not looking up, like the honking will make the seams let out faster. June Alcaraz had worked the steam press 3 summers running and had opinions about everyone who came through the door. She was 19, sharp-tongued, and endlessly amused by the fact that Nora, all of 28 and already talking like the landlady of her own life, worried about money the way other people worried about weather. "Be nice," Nora said. The Rosewaters half are July. "The Rosewaters all are July," June said. "That's different. That means they own us." The courier came in backward, hauling a rolling rack draped in garment bags, each one tagged with the hotel's little rose stamp. Suits, mostly. The Rosewater ran a summer gala at the end of every season. A white linen affair on the lawn above the water that the whole town called the Rose Ball, whether the hotel liked it or not. And every year a rack of the family's and the staff's finest arrived at Nora's door for letting out, taking in, and the quiet resurrection of trousers that had spent 11 months forgetting the shape of their owners. "Sign here," the courier said. "They want the lot back by Friday. Mr. Vance is personally on top." "Mr. Vance is always personally on top," June murmured. Nora signed. The van honked again, pointlessly, and pulled away, and the two of them stood looking at the rack the way you look at a week's worth of work that has just walked in the door wearing someone else's rose stamp. She worked through the bags one at a time, because that was the only way anything ever got done. One seam, one hem, one careful hour. Salt air moved the muslin curtain. The fudge next door hid its mid-morning boil, and the sugar smell thickened. She had gotten as far as a slate-gray linen jacket, beautifully made, worn soft at the inside cuff where a wrist had rubbed it 1,000 times, when her hand, sliding into the breast pocket out of pure habit, closed on something that was not a receipt. It was a handkerchief, and folded inside the handkerchief, warm from the pocket and the window light, was a ring. Nora had handled a great many things people forgot in pockets. Bus tickets. Buttons, once, memorably, a live cricket. She had never held anything like this. It was old, That was the first thing. The way it was old, the way real things are old, the rose gold band worn thin and bright. The stone an antique cushion cut with a faint warmth at its heart, held in a setting shaped like a tiny nest of leaves. It caught the window and threw a small trembling coin of light onto the ceiling, and both women watched it move. That, June said slowly, is not a cufflink. No, Nora said. Nora, that's an engagement ring. That's somebody's whole life in a handkerchief. Nora closed her hand around it, then opened her hand again, as if it might have rearranged itself into something more ordinary. It hadn't. Under the leaves of the setting there was an inscription, worn nearly to nothing, and she tilted it to the light and read the ghost of it, to the one who stays. Her chest did something complicated at that, some old bruise pressing up under the words, and she set it down on the cutting table faster than she meant to. "We call the hotel," she said. "We could keep it," June said, and then, at Nora's look, lifted both hands. "I'm joking. Mostly, I'm allowed one criminal thought a day. It's in my contract. You don't have a contract, which is why I'm owed the thought." Nora was already reaching for the phone. Because here was the truth she wouldn't have said aloud, not to June, not to anyone. A ring like that, lost, was a small emergency happening somewhere to somebody. She knew what it was to have the one thing that mattered slip out of a pocket you trusted. She wasn't going to be the reason it stayed lost. The Rosewater's front desk put her on hold twice, transferred her to housekeeping, transferred her back, and finally, after a full 4 minutes of a tinny recording extolling the hotel's ocean view suites, connected her to a woman named Marjorie, who ran the concierge desk and had, by the sound of her, run it since the building went up. "An engagement ring," Marjorie repeated. There was a small silence on the line, the kind that has weight. "In the gray linen. You're certain. Rose gold. Old cushion cut stone. There's an inscription inside." Another silence. When Marjorie spoke again, her voice had dropped into something confidential and urgent, a voice for saying things fast before someone walked past. "Don't send it back with the courier. Don't put it in a bag. Bring it yourself, and bring it to me, and don't mention it to the young Mr. Vance's office by phone. Just come. Can you come today?" Nora looked at the wedding gown on the form, at the rack still 3/4 full, at June already mouthing "Go, go, I've got the press." "I can come today," she said. The Rosewater sat at the headland end of the boardwalk, where the town's cheerful clutter gave way to green lawn and white railings and the long silver plate of the ocean. Nora walked it, because parking there cost more than the walk was worth, and because the walk gave her time to talk herself down. The boardwalk planks were hot enough through her sandals to feel like a hand held under her feet. The air smelled of sunscreen and fried dough, and closer to the headland, of cut grass and the green mineral tang of the tide going out. A little girl ran past trailing a kite that wouldn't fly, laughing at it, her mother jogging behind with 2 dripping ice creams held high like torches. And Nora smiled and felt, for a moment, entirely outside of whatever she was walking toward. Then she came up the hotel steps into the shade of the veranda, and the doorman opened the tall glass door, and the cool marble breath of the lobby folded over her, and she was inside the Rosewater for the first time in her life. It was beautiful the way things are beautiful when nobody who works there is allowed to be tired in front of you. Palms in brass pots, a staircase that curved like a treble clef, the slow fan. Marjorie was at the concierge desk before Nora had fully crossed the floor. A small, upright woman with silver-threaded hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she came around the desk with both hands out, not for the ring, Nora realized, but for Nora's hands. "You walked," Marjorie said. In this heat. Bless you. Sit, sit. No, don't sit. There isn't time. He's between the kitchen and the ballroom, and if we're quick. She stopped. Her eyes had found Nora's closed fist. Is that it? May I? Nora opened her hand. Marjorie went very still. She did not touch it. She looked at it the way you look at a face you haven't seen in years, and when she spoke her voice had gone soft and rough at once. Where has it been? She said, to the ring, not to Nora. You wicked, wandering thing. We turned this hotel inside out. It was in the breast pocket of a gray linen jacket, Nora said. For alterations. Whoever wore it last, it must have. Whoever wore it last, said a new voice, from the direction of the ballroom, would like to know why his private property is being discussed in the lobby. Nora turned. The man crossing the marble was tall and unhurried in the particular way of people who have never in their lives had to run for anything, dark-haired, in shirt-sleeves rolled to the forearm and a tie loosened against the heat. He was perhaps a few years older than her, and handsome in a closed sort of way, like a house with all the curtains drawn on a bright day. His gaze went to Marjorie, then to Nora, then down to Nora's open palm, and Nora watched something happen to his face that she would think about for a long while afterward. He stopped walking. All the careful, curated ease went out of him at once, the way water goes out of a glass that's been knocked, and for one unguarded second he looked simply, nakedly stricken. Then the curtains came down again. Marjorie, he said quietly, thank you. Would you give us the desk? Elliot, please, Marjorie went, but she went slowly, and she touched Nora's arm on the way past, a small pressure. Be kind to him, or be careful, Nora couldn't tell which, and then it was the two of them and the ring and the slow-turning fan. You're the alterations shop, he said. Bell, Nora Bell. Elliot Vance. He didn't offer his hand. His hand, she noticed, had gone to his other hand, one thumb turning slowly around the base of a finger where no ring was, an old habit worn into him. You found it in the jacket, in the pocket, wrapped in a handkerchief. I called as soon as, who else knows. It wasn't quite a question. Nora felt the temperature of the room change. My assistant, June, she was there when I found it. And Marjorie. That's all. Not the courier. No, not my office. Marjorie said not to. I don't know why. I don't need to know why, she added, because he had gone tense again, and because it was true, and because there was something in the way he stood, braced, as though the ring in her hand were a door about to open onto weather, that she recognized without wanting to. Mr. Vance, I came to give it back. That's the whole errand. She held her palm out flat. It's yours. Take it, and I'll walk home, and you'll never have to think about the alterations shop again. He looked at the ring. He did not take it. How much? He said. Nora blinked. Sorry? For your discretion. For your assistance. Name a number, and I'll have it seen to before you reach the boardwalk. He said it the way she imagined he said most things, evenly, reasonably, a man solving a problem in the most efficient available way, and it landed in her chest like a slap. Because he had looked at her, taken in the sensible sandals and the pin-scarred hands and the shop she'd named herself, and decided he knew exactly what she was. The heat went up the back of her neck. She closed her hand. I walked here, she said, keeping her voice very level, in July, up the whole boardwalk, because a woman on the phone told me not to trust a courier with something that had the words to the one who stays written inside it. I didn't come for a number, Mr. Vance, and now I think I'll keep my discretion, since you clearly can't afford it. She set the ring down on the concierge desk, precisely, the little coin of light leaping once to the ceiling. There, it's home. I'll see myself out. She got 4 steps. Wait. not commanding, this time. Something had cracked in it. "Please, Miss Bell, Nora, wait." She stopped, but she didn't turn, and the silence stretched long enough that she heard the terrace doors breathing. The far small roar of the tide, a spoon somewhere clinking china. "That was unforgivable," he said, "and I'm going to ask you to forgive it anyway, because I've had the worst 3 weeks of my life, and I've just been handed the only thing in them I actually wanted back, and I responded by insulting the person who returned it, which is a breath, a dry, joyless, almost laugh, which is apparently the man I am now. I'm sorry." That she hadn't expected. She turned. He was standing over the ring, not picking it up, both hands flat on the desk on either side of it, his head bent as if it were heavier to look at than to hold. Up close the drawn curtain look had a cost behind it she could see now. The fine lines of not sleeping. The thumb still worrying at that bare finger. "I don't need your money," she said more gently. "I do need to get back to a rack of your family's suits, all of which are due Friday, so Friday," he repeated, and something moved behind his eyes. Some fast private arithmetic. He looked up at her. "The Rose Ball is 3 weeks Saturday. So I've been told. Twice. By your courier, who honks." The almost laugh again, realer this time, gone as fast as it came. Then he was quiet, studying her, and it was a different kind of studying than before, not pricing her, but weighing something, some idea that had walked into the room with the ring and was refusing to leave. She watched him decide to say a reckless thing. She watched him decide against it. She watched him decide, against all of it, to say it anyway. "Nora," he said, "can I ask you something that will sound insane?" "You can ask," she said. "I make no promises about my face while you do." He picked up the ring at last. He held it in the flat of his palm the way she had held it, and the terrace light warmed the old gold. And he looked at it, and then he looked at her. And Nora felt the whole cool marble morning tip a few degrees off level. "My grandmother is coming back for the ball," he said. Vivian Vance. "She built this hotel with her own 2 hands out of a bathhouse and a bad loan. And she still owns it in every way the paperwork won't admit, and 3 weeks ago I told her something to make her stop pushing me toward a life I don't want. And it was a lie. And this ring is the proof she'll ask to see." His jaw tightened. "She wrote to me. Would you like to know what she wrote? I have a feeling you're going to tell me." He took a folded card from his shirt pocket, cream, expensive, a fountain pen hand slanting hard across it, and read, and Nora heard the grandmother in it before she understood a word. The clipped consonants of a woman who had never once been kept waiting. Elliot. "I am delighted to learn you have finally chosen a wife instead of a spreadsheet. I shall arrive the Thursday before the ball, and I shall expect to meet her and to see my mother's ring on her hand, or I shall assume you have been managing me, and you know precisely what I do to people who manage me. Kisses. Grandmother." He folded the card. She underlined kisses. "It's a threat." Nora stared at him. Out on the water, a boat horn answered the gulls. The fudge smell from across town seemed 1,000 miles away. "You lost the ring," she said slowly, working it out, 3 weeks before you have to produce it on the hand of a fiancé who doesn't exist. "I lost the ring," he agreed, "and I lost the arrangement I'd made. The fiancé who doesn't exist stopped agreeing to not exist in a very specific way last week and took the plan with her." He set the ring down again, carefully, between them on the desk, and looked at Nora across it, and she understood, a full second before he said it, exactly what the insane thing was going to be. And still it stopped her breath when it came. "Wear it," Elliot Vance said. 3 weeks. You wear my grandmother's ring, you let this town believe a story, you survive one dinner and one dance under Vivian's eye, and I will make the alterations shop on Harbor Lane a problem you never have to think about again. Bell and daughter, paid clear, for as long as you want it standing. He drew a breath. You returned the one thing I couldn't replace. I'm asking you to help me not lose everything it was holding up. And that was how Nora Bell, who had walked into the Rosewater Hotel to give a ring back, came to be standing in the cool marble hush with her hand closing around it, and the fan turning, and the tide going out, and a man she'd known for 11 minutes asking her to be his. You don't understand what you're asking, she said, and her voice came out steadier than the rest of her felt. People in this town have known me since I was a girl pinning my grandmother's hems. You want them to believe I'm marrying the Rosewater. I want them to believe you're marrying me, he said, which is not the same thing, though I'm aware nobody here has ever once told the difference. There it was again, that flat, bruised almost humor, and it undid her a little more than the offer had, because it was the first thing he'd said that sounded like a person instead of a problem being managed. She looked down at the ring in her hand. To the one who stays. Her thumb pressed the worn inscription, and the old bruise under it pressed back. And she thought of the shop. The rent. June's press 3 summers running, the flat irons in the window that had been her grandmother's, the whole small, hard-won life she'd stitched together out of other people's hems and could lose in one bad season. I need to think, she said. Of course. I mean it. I'm not saying yes. She was already, she realized with something like alarm, not saying no. I need to walk home and think and not have this, she lifted the ring, on my hand while I do it. She held it out. He didn't take it. He closed her fingers over it instead, both his hands warm and certain around hers, and the leaves of the setting pressed a small pattern into her palm. Then take it home while you think, he said. It's safer with you than it's been with anyone in weeks. That, at least, you've already proven. He let go, stepped back, slid his hands into his pockets like a man putting away tools. The courier comes Friday for the suits. Send your answer with him, or don't, and I'll come to you. A pause, the terrace doors breathing behind him. But I hope you'll come back up the boardwalk, Nora Bell. I find I'd rather hear it from you. She walked home with an engagement ring in her fist and no idea whose it was going to be by Friday. The boardwalk had thickened toward noon, all sunburn and sugar and radios, and Nora moved through it in a bubble of unreality, the hot planks under her sandals, the ring's small weight against her folded fingers like a coal that wouldn't cool. Halfway down, she stopped at the rail and opened her hand and looked at it in the plain, honest daylight, away from marble and brass and the drawn curtain face of a man who'd insulted her and apologized and then asked her to belong to him inside the same 11 minutes. To the one who stays. She had spent her whole life being the one who was left. It was a small, mean fact she kept folded up small, the way you keep a thing you've stopped taking out to look at. The mother who'd gone to the city for a season and made the season permanent, the fiancé of her own, years ago now, who'd decided at the last that a woman who could fix everything was somehow not a woman worth keeping. Nora Bell fixed things. She let out seams and took in waists and turned frayed cuffs and sent people back into the world looking more loved than they were, and at the end of the day she locked the shop and walked home alone and told herself that being useful was its own kind of being wanted. And now a stranger had put his grandmother's ring in her hand. A ring that had waited in a dark pocket to be found by exactly the sort of woman who returns things, and asked her to wear the words she'd never once been told. For pretend. For 3 weeks. For the shop. It's a business arrangement, she said aloud, to the ocean, which did not care, and a passing teenager gave her a look. She closed her hand. Down the boardwalk, the Fudge Kitchen's fan was pushing its sweet, burnt breath out into the street, and past it, narrow and shut and hers, was Bell and daughter, where June was surely at the window by now watching for her, ready to demand every single word. Nora slipped the ring into her own breast pocket, over her heart, where its owner had carried it, and where she could feel it there with every step, warm, waiting, a whole life folded up in gold, and she did not, walking the last hot stretch home, take it back out to look at it again. She was too afraid of how easily it had fit the shape of the pocket, and of the fact that the question she was actually going to lie awake turning over, all that long bright July night, was not whether to say yes to save the shop. It was why, when he'd folded her fingers closed around it, some starved and stubborn corner of her had wanted to say yes for no reason at all. She did say yes in the end, though not to him first. She said it to June at 7 the next morning, before the Fudge Kitchen had even lit its burners, in the gray undersea light of a shop that hadn't slept any better than its owner. Nora had come down to find June already there, which had never once happened in 3 summers, sitting cross-legged on the pressing table, with 2 coffees going cold beside her, and an expression like a girl who has stayed up guarding a door. "You didn't sleep either," Nora said. "I slept beautifully. I slept the sleep of the innocent." June handed over the nearer coffee. "You, however, look like a woman who spent the night arguing with a ring. So, are we rich, are we ruined, or are we both, which is my personal prediction?" Nora wrapped both hands around the cup. The steam carried up the smell of it, burnt and bitter and familiar, and under that the shop's own smell, old cotton, machine oil, the ghost of yesterday's sugar in the walls. Out past the propped window, the harbor was flat pewter, a lobster boat muttering its way out, a gull walking the rail like it paid rent there. "He offered to pay the shop clear," she said, "for as long as I want it standing." June went very still, which for June was a kind of shouting. In exchange for 3 weeks of being engaged to him, a dinner, a dance, his grandmother believing it. Nora made herself say the rest, because saying it to the harbor last night hadn't made it any less absurd, and maybe saying it to June would. Then she goes home, the ball's over, I give the ring back, and Bell and daughter never worries about a bad season again. "Huh," June said. "That's all? Huh? I'm rationing my opinions. You get 1 an hour before noon, it's a labor thing." She uncrossed her legs and hopped down off the table, and when she landed, she wasn't smiling anymore. "Nora, that man looked at you for 11 minutes and decided you were purchasable. You told me so yourself. You came back so mad you re-hemmed the same trouser leg twice. I did not. You did. It's on the rack. 1 leg's a full inch shorter, and some poor Vance is going to walk into the ball listing to port." June crossed her arms. "And now, what, we're taking his money?" It was, Nora thought, the exact question she'd carried up and down the length of a sleepless night, and hearing it in June's mouth, younger, blunter, unafraid, didn't sharpen it so much as turn it over to show the soft underside. She set her coffee down. "He apologized," she said, "for the money thing. Really apologized, June, not the kind men do to make you stop being upset in front of them. And then he told me the truth about why, which he didn't have to, and the truth was worse and sadder than the lie would have been." She pressed her thumb to the counter, felt the pin marks worn into the wood by 20 years of her grandmother's hands and then her own. "And I looked at the books last night. The real ones, not the ones I tell you are fine." June's arms came uncrossed. How bad? August is fine. September, we're letting out the seams on our own budget. Nora tried to say it lightly and mostly failed. One slow autumn, and I lose the lease. You lose the job. And I stand in a shop my grandmother named after the two of us, and explain to her flatirons why I let it go. The lobster boat's mutter had faded out past the breakwater. In the quiet, the shop ticked and settled, warming as the sun came up over the Fudge Kitchen's roof, and June looked at Nora for a long moment with all the sharpness gone out of her face, and something much older sitting there instead. "Okay," June said. "Then, I have exactly one condition, and I'm using my whole day's opinion on it, so listen." She pointed, dead level, at Nora's heart, where the ring was not, because the ring was upstairs in a teacup by the bed, but where they both knew it had ridden home. You go up there and you make him write it down. All of it. Shop paid clear whether his grandmother buys the story or not. You are not doing 3 weeks of the tightrope and then falling because some rich old woman didn't like your shoes. Her jaw set. You've spent enough of your life being the one who does the fixing and gets nothing back but the mending pile. Not this time. This time, it's on paper. Nora looked at her, 19 and fierce and standing between her boss and the whole indifferent weight of the Rosewater like a girl guarding a door, and felt her throat go tight in a way that had nothing to do with rings or rent. On paper, she agreed, and, June added, retrieving her cold coffee with the air of a lawyer gathering her briefcase, for the record, when this ends in spectacular disaster, I get to say I told you. I want that in writing, too. You don't have a contract. Which is why I'm owed the disaster, June said, and turned to light the press. Nora walked back up the boardwalk at 10 before the heat had fully arrived, with the ring in her breast pocket and June's condition folded up beside it. The tide was in this time, slapping green and busy against the pilings, and the boardwalk smelled of wet rope and coffee and someone's early fried dough, and children were already staking out the good stretch of beach with towels and buckets. She passed the kite girl from yesterday, flying a different kite that flew, and the child waved at her as though they were old friends, and Nora waved back and thought that at least somebody's morning was uncomplicated. The doorman knew her now. That was the first small strangeness, the way he inclined his head and said Miss Bell, as if her walking into the Rosewater were an established fact of the world, when yesterday she'd been a stranger with a courier's clipboard. Marjorie was at the concierge desk and rose the instant the glass door sighed shut behind her, and there was a question in the old woman's whole upright body that she was too well trained to say out loud. "He's on the terrace," Marjorie said. "He hasn't eaten. He's rearranged the breakfast service twice, which is how he frets, so if you've come to say no, be quick and be kind, and if you've come to say yes," she hesitated, and something crossed her face, worry and hope tangled past separating. "Be careful. There's more weather in this than he's told you. There always is. With them." "With them," Nora repeated. But Marjorie had already stepped back behind her desk, having said one sentence more than she'd meant to, and only added in her ordinary concierge voice, straight through the palms, "Dear, mind the step down." Elliot Vance was standing at the terrace rail with his back to her and his sleeves rolled and a cup of coffee going cold at his elbow, exactly the way she'd left her own an hour ago. And for a moment before he heard her, she saw the same braced set to his shoulders she'd have seen in her own reflection. The terrace looked straight out over the water, the lawn falling green to the white railing and the long silver shine beyond. And the morning wind came up off it smelling of salt and cut grass and warm stone, and stirred his hair, and he didn't turn until her sandal found the loose board by the door and gave her away. He turned. He saw her face first, and then she watched him do it, made himself not read it too fast. "You came back up the boardwalk," he said. "I said I would rather you heard it from me." She stopped at a careful distance, the width of a wrought iron table between them, its glass tops scattered with the crumbs of a breakfast he hadn't touched. "Miss Vance, Elliot, if you're about to make me a fiancé, I think we're past Mr. Vance then." Catching himself, sorry. "That was presumptuous. I don't know yet what you're about to make me." "I have conditions," Nora said. "One, mostly, it's not mine. It's June's, and she's right, so it's mine now." She drew a breath and made her voice as level as she could, because this was the part that mattered. The part where she found out what kind of man she was actually agreeing to stand beside. The shop gets paid clear, whatever happens. Not if your grandmother believes it, not if I perform well enough at your dinner and don't embarrass anyone at your dance, whatever happens. If Vivian Vance takes one look at me and knows if the whole thing falls apart on the first night, Belle and daughter still stands. Because I won't do 3 weeks on a rope with your family holding the other end, wondering the whole time if I'm about to be dropped. She'd expected him to negotiate. Men who opened with a number always negotiated. She braced for it. He didn't. He set his cup down on the rail and looked at her, and there was something in his face that she couldn't name at first because she wasn't used to seeing it aimed at her. Respect, maybe, plain and a little startled. The look of a man who's braced for a fight and been handed a fair one instead. "That's not a condition," he said. "That's just decent. I should have offered it, and I didn't, and I'm—" He stopped. Started again, more carefully. "I've been in rooms my whole life where everyone assumes the other person is angling for the larger cut. It makes you forget some people simply want the door to lock behind them at night, knowing it's theirs. Yes, whatever happens. I'll have it drawn up today, and I'll sign it in front of you before you agree to a single thing beyond it." A breath. "Is there a 2? "There's a 2, Nora said, because it had arrived in her chest somewhere on the boardwalk and refused to be talked out of. "You don't get to buy my silence, and you don't get to buy me being pleasant. Inside this arrangement, I'm a person, not a service. If I think you're being a fool, I'll say so. If your grandmother's cruel to me, I won't smile through it for your convenience. And when it's over clean, no strings, no favors owed, no version of you 3 months from now who thinks I'm still on his ledger." "Agreed," he said so quickly that she frowned. "You didn't even think about it. I've been thinking about very little else since you set the ring down on Marjorie's desk and told me I couldn't afford your discretion." That dry, bruised almost humor again, surfacing and vanishing. "It's the truest thing anyone said to me in a year. I'd be a poor businessman to argue with a woman who's already right." He came around the table then, not too close, and held out his hand, properly. This time, the way he hadn't yesterday. "Nora Bell, will you save my whole life for 3 weeks and let me pay a debt I'll owe you long after?" She looked at the hand. It was a good hand, she thought helplessly, a hand that had done more than sign things, one thumb still carrying the pale, worn mark where a ring it wasn't wearing had lived. She thought of June by the press. She thought of the flatirons in the window. She thought of the words folded up in gold against her heart, "To the one who stays," and how her whole life had been a long argument that they could never be about her. She put her hand in his. 3 weeks, she said. "And I want it in writing that when it's over, you go back to never thinking about the alterations shop again." "That," said Elliot Vance, closing his hand warm and certain around hers, "is the one clause I already know I'm going to break." She had exactly 1 second to decide whether that was charm or honesty, and no time at all to decide what she'd do about either, because that was the moment the terrace doors opened behind her, and a voice she didn't know, bright, cut glass, delighted, said, "Oh, Elliot, you've replaced me. And in linen, how thrifty." Nora turned. The woman in the doorway was everything the morning wasn't, crisp where the day was going soft, cool where it was warming, in a pale sleeveless dress that had never in its life been let out or taken in by anyone but its maker. She was beautiful the way a well-run front desk is beautiful, nothing out of place and nothing offered. And she came across the terrace on heels that found the loose board and didn't so much as wobble, and she looked at Nora's hand still folded inside Elliot's with an interest so sharp it had edges. Nora felt him go rigid beside her, felt his hand tighten once around hers before he remembered to loosen it. "Sloane," he said, and all the warmth had gone flat out of his voice, planed down to something wary. "You're not on the guest list. I'm never on the guest list, darling, and I've never once let it stop me. Vivian adores that about me. It's practically why she," Sloane's gaze slid to Nora, unhurried, cataloging the sandals, the pin-scarred hands, the shop cotton dress, exactly as Elliot had done yesterday, and Nora had hated exactly as much. "I'm sorry. We haven't met." Which is odd, because I thought I knew everyone Elliot was pretending to be engaged to. There's usually a shorter list. "Nora Bell," Nora said, and did not let go of his hand, though every instinct told her to. "And I think you knew that before you asked." Something flickered behind the cool surprise, and under it a quick recalculating interest, as if Nora had turned out to be a slightly better game than expected. "She's got a mouth," Sloane said to Elliot, delighted. "You always did fold when they had a mouth. It's your one predictable feature." She stepped closer, and the wind brought the sharp green, expensive smell of her perfume over the salt and grass, wrong somehow on a terrace this bright. "Do you know what he's asking of you, Miss Bell? Truly? Or did he do the thing where he tells you a small, sad, true story, so you don't ask about the large one?" Sloane, low, a warning. "Because I'll tell you what he told me, when it was my hand he wanted to borrow." She smiled, and it was a lovely smile, and it did not reach anywhere near her eyes. "He told me it was 3 weeks and 1 dinner. He forgot to mention what Vivian actually decides at that dinner. He forgot to mention the 'that's enough.'" Elliot let go of Nora's hand and stepped between them. And for the first time since Nora had met him there was real heat in him, the drawn curtains thrown back on something that wasn't grief at all. "You made your choice last week. You don't get to come back and set fire to the next one, because you didn't care for how yours ended." "I didn't care for how you ended it," Sloane said. And just for an instant the cut glass cracked, and something raw showed through, and Nora, who fixed things, who noticed the strain in a seam before it tore, saw that whatever this had been, it had cost the woman something real. And that made her far more dangerous than her poise did. Then the crack closed. Sloane stepped back, smoothing her already smooth dress, gathering herself the way Marjorie had gathered her concierge voice. "Vivian arrives Thursday," she said, pleasant again, to Nora, as if they were merely 2 women who'd met at a party. "I'll be at the ball, of course. I'm always at the ball. Do wear the ring where she can see it, Miss Bell. She'll want to read the inscription." She always makes them read the inscription. Her eyes went, just once, to Nora's breast pocket, unerring, as though she knew exactly where the ring rode. "To the one who stays. You'll want to have an answer ready for what that's worth. I never quite did." And she turned, and her heels found the loose board again and didn't wobble, and the terrace doors sighed shut behind her, and she was gone, leaving the green sharp smell of her hanging over the ruined breakfast and a silence you could have hemmed. Nora let out a breath. "Well," she said, "she's a lot." Elliot didn't answer at once. He'd gone back to the rail and taken up the cold coffee and was looking out at the water, both hands around the cup, the tendon standing in his jaw. Down on the lawn, a gardener was dragging a hose across the green, and a wren went over low and complaining, and the ordinary summer morning went on being ordinary all around the two of them, as if the last 5 minutes hadn't happened. "What did she mean," Nora said, "about what Vivian decides at the dinner? Nothing you need to carry. Too fast." The same flat too fast he'd used yesterday on how much for your discretion. The voice of a man closing a door. Nora came and stood at the rail beside him, close enough that the wind put a strand of her hair across his sleeve before she reached up and tucked it back. She looked at the side of his face, at the knot sleeping in it, and she thought about June's finger leveled at her heart. You're not doing 3 weeks on the tightrope and then falling, and she thought about how a seam that's hiding a strain will always, always go at the worst moment, in front of everyone, at the ball. "That's my second condition, come early," she said quietly. "Remember, I'm a person, not a service. You don't get to hand me half a story and let me walk into the other half in front of your grandmother." She waited until he turned and looked at her. "What does Vivian decide at that dinner, Elliot?" For a long moment she thought he wouldn't tell her. The wind came up off the water, and the hose hissed on the lawn, and somewhere behind them, in the cool of the hotel, a clock was striking the half-hour, and she watched him weigh it, the same way he'd weighed the reckless thing yesterday before he said it. Decide against all of it on the truth. "The Rosewater isn't mine," he said. "Not yet. My grandmother owns it outright and always has, and 3 weeks ago she told me she's decided it's time to hand it on before she's too old to enjoy watching what's done with it. She's choosing at the ball. Between me," his mouth twisted, "and my cousin Grant, who has run 3 of his own ventures into the harbor and charmed her through every one, and who has spent this entire year telling her, gently, over long lunches, that a man who's built nothing but a life of spreadsheets and can't so much as keep hold of a fiancé has no business keeping hold of the thing she loves most in the world." The wind died for a second, the way it does, and in the sudden quiet, Nora heard her own heartbeat, and under it the small cold arithmetic clicking into place. "So it's not one dinner and a dance," she said slowly. "It's not to make an old woman stop pushing you toward a wife. She's watching us to decide whether you get the hotel. She's watching you," Elliot said, "to decide whether I've finally become a man who can hold on to something. And Grant will be watching too, and Sloane, and everyone in this town who's ever wanted the Vances taken down a peg, all of them at one dinner and one dance, looking for the seam." He set the cup down. "That's the part I didn't tell you. That's the part she came here just now to make sure you knew before you signed anything. Because Sloane has never once done a cruel thing without a reason underneath it, and her reason this morning was to see whether the truth would send you back down the boardwalk." He looked at Nora, and for once he didn't manage to draw the curtains at all. "It's a great deal more than a shop's worth of pretending, Nora. I'd understand entirely if you, when Thursday?" Nora said. He blinked. "What? When on Thursday does she arrive? Morning? Afternoon? I need to know how many days I actually have to learn to be a woman who could plausibly have gotten you to hold on to her." Her heart was going hard, and her hands, she noticed distantly, were perfectly steady. The way they always went steady the instant a job turned out to be bigger than it looked. "Because if I've got until Thursday, I'd like to start today. I don't do things badly on purpose, Mr. Vance, and I'm not about to start with the biggest job anyone's ever handed me." Something opened in his face that she'd remember later. At the worst of it, not relief exactly, something more careful and more dangerous than relief. The look of a man who has just watched a person choose to stay after being given every reason to go and understood too late to stop it that it was going to matter to him whether she meant it. "Thursday afternoon," he said. "The 3 o'clock train, if it's on time, which it never." He didn't finish, because Marjorie came fast through the terrace doors with a slip of paper in her hand and a look on her face that stopped both of them cold, and she wasn't using her concierge voice anymore. "Elliot," she held out the paper. "Telegram from the junction." Her eyes went to Nora, then back. "She's changed her train. She's not coming Thursday." A breath. "She'll be on the noon boat tomorrow. She wants the whole family at dinner to meet the bride." For a moment, none of them moved. The telegram slip trembled very slightly in Marjorie's fingers, though the wind off the water had dropped, and Nora heard the gardener's hose hiss and cut off on the lawn below, and a screen door bang somewhere in the guts of the hotel, and her own pulse arrive loud in her ears. "Tomorrow," Elliot said. He didn't reach for the paper. She said Thursday. She wrote Thursday. She underlined the day like it was a court date. She's changed it. Marjorie set the slip on the crumb-scattered glass between them, gently, the way you set down something that might go off. "Noon boat, Saturday. The whole family to dine. Kindly have my rooms aired and the bride at the table." That's the whole of it. That's Vivian. She looked at Nora then, and there was apology all through her lined face. She does this. She moves the ground under you to see who keeps their feet. She's done it to boards, to bankers, to her own son. She's never once done it to be kind, but she's never once done it without a reason. "The reason," Elliot said flatly, "is Grant." He picked the telegram up at last and read it and set it down again, and Nora watched the not sleeping in his face deepen into something closer to a man doing sums he already knew the answer to. He'll have gotten to her at the junction. Long lunch, a bottle of something old, a few soft words about how a real engagement doesn't need 3 weeks of warning to sit down to dinner. How a man sure of his bride can produce her tomorrow as easily as Thursday. And she'll have smiled and moved her train up nearly 3 weeks just to watch me scramble. He laughed, one dry note with no floor under it. "He's good. I'll give him that. He's always been good." "Then we don't scramble," Nora said. Both of them turned to look at her. She hadn't quite known she was going to say it. It had arrived the same way the steadiness always arrived, the instant a job turned out to be worse than the estimate, her grandmother's voice in it, the flat calm of a woman with a mouthful of pins facing a gown that had to be finished by morning whether the bride had gained weight or not. "We had until Thursday," she said. "Now we have until noon tomorrow. That's less time. It's not no time. I've turned a torn hem into a wearable dress in a lot less than a day, Mr. Vance, and I did it without a hotel full of people and a woman on a beaded chain who plainly wants us to win." She glanced at Marjorie, who had gone still. "You do want us to win. You've been trying to tell me so since I walked in yesterday with his ring in my fist." Marjorie's mouth worked once. "I've worked for that woman 41 years, she said, "and for this boy since he was small enough to hide under this exact table when the season got loud. So yes." Her voice roughened. "Yes, I want you to win. God help me, I've wanted somebody real for him so long I'd have taken a stranger off the boardwalk, and instead the boardwalk sent me one who returns rings she could have kept." She pressed her lips together, hard, and gathered herself back into the concierge. "Tell me what you need." "A room where nobody comes in," Nora said. "The suit's from the rack. I need his gray linen, the one the ring was in, because if I'm going to stand next to this man tomorrow, I want him looking like someone worth holding on to, and that jacket's a half-inch wrong at the shoulder. I saw it yesterday. Tea, something to eat that he'll actually eat." She looked at Elliot. "And you, all afternoon. Every dull true fact about yourself you'd tell a wife, and none you'd tell a stranger, because your grandmother is going to spend one entire dinner hunting for the seam, and the only way she doesn't find it is if there isn't one." He was staring at her with the careful, dangerous, not quite relief she was beginning to know. "You're actually going to do this?" "I signed nothing," she reminded him. "You haven't drawn the paper. As of this minute, I'm a woman who returned your ring and got cornered by your ex on a terrace, and I could still walk down that boardwalk and go let out your family's trousers and never see any of you again." She held his eyes. "So, draw the paper. Shop clear whatever happens. In ink. In front of me, like you said. Do that, and I'll teach you your own life back by tomorrow noon." For a moment, he didn't move. Then he crossed to the terrace doors and called for someone named Peter in a voice that had command back in it, and Marjorie was already moving, and the ordinary machinery of the Rosewater woke up around them and began, quietly, to bend itself toward the impossible thing. They did it in the linen room, in the end a long, cool interior space off the second-floor landing, shelved to the ceiling with pressed sheets and folded towels that gave the air a clean, scorched smell, warm cotton and hot iron and lavender water, the most honest room in the whole hotel. There was a wide deal table down the middle, scarred with decades of folding, and a window at the far end that looked out over the kitchen yard instead of the sea, and Nora felt herself settle the moment she stepped into it the way she never had in the marble downstairs. This was a working room. She knew working rooms. The lawyer came and went before they began. Elliot signed his half at the deal table with a fountain pen while Nora read every line twice. And where the clause about the shop sat he had made them add a sentence in his own hand, independent of the outcome of any family determination, and Nora read that twice too, and something in her chest let go a notch she hadn't known was wound. "June will want a copy," she said. "June can have the original. I'll keep the copy." He capped the pen. "I get the feeling she's the one I actually have to answer to. She'd like that you know it." Nora folded the paper small and put it where the ring had ridden, over her heart, and did not miss that his eyes followed it there. "Right, jacket first. Take it off." He took the gray linen off and handed it across, and she turned it inside out over her arm, and found the shoulder seam with her thumb. And there it was, the small wrongness she'd clocked yesterday in one glance across a lobby. The left shoulder built a breadth fuller than the right, so the jacket sat asking a question nobody could quite hear. "Who made this?" she murmured, mostly to the jacket. "A man in the city my grandfather swore by. He doesn't sew any more." A pause behind her. "Grandfather wore it. It came to me when he passed, and I had it cut down, and I never once got it to sit right and never knew why. Because they cut it to your grandfather's shoulders, and your grandfather carried his weight on the left." She had the seam ripper out of the little roll of tools she took everywhere, and she was already opening the shoulder with quick, sure strokes, the threads giving one by one with a sound like tiny things letting go. "You carry yours square. It's half an inch of nothing, and it's why you felt not quite dressed in the one jacket that means the most to you your whole life." She glanced up. He'd gone very quiet. "What? Nothing, too, fast again." Then, catching himself, softer, "No, not nothing. Nobody's ever just looked at me and known where I carry my weight. It's a job, Nora said, to cover the way it landed. It's the whole job, actually. You look until you see where the strain is, and then you take it apart at the seam and build it back so it stops asking the question. She bent to the shoulder again. People are the same. It's just that they charge you more and thank you less. He laughed, a real one this time, startled out of him, gone before it finished, and pulled a stool up to the other side of the table and sat, in his shirt sleeves, and let her work on his grandfather's jacket, and began, haltingly and then less so, to teach her himself. She learned that he took his coffee the way she'd found it, cold, because he forgot it. That his mother had gone somewhere warm with a second husband and sent cards at the holidays signed with her first name. That his father had run the hotel before him, badly and charmingly, much like the cousin Grant. And that Elliot had spent his 20s quietly repairing what his father broke without ever once being thanked for it either. Which was why, she thought, but didn't say. He'd assumed yesterday that everyone came at him for the larger cut, because, in his experience, the people who smiled advances usually did. She learned he'd proposed the arrangement to Sloane 6 weeks ago because Sloane was clever and cool and understood a transaction, and that it had ended not because the transaction failed, but because somewhere in the middle of it Sloane had stopped treating it as one and he had not. And that he'd handled the ending, by his own flat admission, like a coward with a spreadsheet. That's the large story she meant, Nora said. She had the shoulder pinned now and was easing it true, and she said it lightly to keep it safe. On the terrace. The one you didn't tell me. His hands went still on the table. Part of it. There's more? The kitchen yard clattered below the window. A delivery, someone laughing, the ordinary din of a hotel feeding itself. He looked at his own hands for a while. Sloane didn't leave, he said finally. I ended it. And she was more hurt than either of us expected her to be. Because we'd both promised each other we were too sensible to be, and being wrong about that in front of a person is a particular kind of humiliation she has never forgiven me for, and she is now, he chose the word carefully, motivated. She knows exactly what's at stake at that dinner. She knows Grant. She'll help him, not because she wants him to have the hotel, but because she wants to be in the room when I lose the thing I built my whole quiet life around. He looked up. So when she comes at you tomorrow, and she will, understand that she isn't being cruel for sport. She's the most dangerous kind. She's being cruel from a wound. I noticed, Nora said quietly. On the terrace, when the glass cracked, she smoothed the pinned shoulder flat with her palm. You want to know something about wounded people, Miss Vance? I've been letting out their clothes my whole life. The angriest ones are almost always the ones nobody ever fit. She'll come at me sharp because somewhere she thinks if she'd been sharper, you'd have kept her. That's not a woman I'm afraid of. That's a woman I'm sorry for. She met his eyes, which is a far more dangerous thing to be, and don't you tell her I said so. Something passed over his face that she didn't have a name for and didn't try to find one, and she bent back to the jacket before either of them had to. They worked until the window went gold and then amber, the deal table between them, the lavender and iron smell of the linen room warming as the day did. And by the time the shoulder sat true and asked no more questions, Nora Bell knew more true things about Elliot Vance than she knew about most people she'd sold 30 years of hymns, and had not once, in all of it, been asked a single question back, until, at the very end, holding the finished jacket up to the amber light to check the line of it, he said, not looking at her, You said yesterday that people in this town have known you since you were a girl pinning your grandmother's hems. You didn't say anything about your parents. Or the smallest hesitation, a Mr. Bell somewhere I should know not to run into. There's no Mr. Bell. She said it to the jacket. There was going to be. Once. He decided a woman who could fix everything wasn't a thing worth keeping, which took me an embarrassingly long time to understand as a compliment to him rather than a verdict on me. She hung the jacket on the padded hanger and did not look at Elliot, and my mother went to the city for a season when I was small, and the season never ended. So, that's the whole of it. That's why I return rings I could keep, if you were wondering, and I could see yesterday that you were. Because I know exactly what it is on the other end, when the one thing slips out of the pocket you trusted. The linen room was very quiet. Below, the kitchen yard had gone still, the delivery done, the light almost gone off the sea she couldn't see from here. To the one who stays, Elliot said, very low. Don't. Her voice came out rougher than she wanted. Don't make it about me. It's a business arrangement. You have the paper, I have the paper, and tomorrow at noon I'm going to walk your grandmother's mother's ring into that dining room and make an old woman believe her grandson finally held on to something. Because it saves my shop, and it saves your hotel, and those are good clean reasons, and they're the only ones either of us needs. She picked up her roll of tools and bound it with its ribbon, her hands perfectly steady, the way they always went steady when the rest of her wasn't. 6 o'clock tomorrow, you'll have a wife who knows how you take your coffee and where you carry your weight and what your grandfather's jacket means. That's my half. Don't go making it more than the job. No, he said. Of course not. But he said it the way she'd said her own things too fast all afternoon. The way people say the thing that closes a door they've already left ajar, and she heard it. And he heard her hear it, and neither of them said anything else at all. The noon boat came in on a flat blue Saturday, with the whole sky scrubbed clean, and the harbor crowded with day trippers, and Nora stood on the Rosewater's private landing in a dress that was her own good linen let out that morning by June at 5 a.m. With her mouth full of pins and her opinions mercifully swallowed, and watched a small, elegant figure come down the gangway on the arm of a steward, as if the steward were furniture she'd graciously agreed to lean on. Vivian Vance was smaller than the hotel she'd built out of a bathhouse and a bad loan, and that was the only small thing about her. She was perhaps 80, and wore it like a rank. Silver hair dressed close, a traveling suit the exact gray-green of the sea behind her. A stick she carried, rather than leaned on, and eyes. Nora felt them land from 30 feet off, the pale, hunting gray of a woman who had spent 60 years watching people decide whether to lie to her. There she is, Marjorie breathed, at Nora's shoulder. Chin up, dear. She smells fear the way the fudge kitchen smells sugar. And then, louder, warm, stepping forward, Mrs. Vance, welcome home. Marjorie, you've aired my rooms. It wasn't a question. Vivian came up the landing at her own pace, the stick tapping the boards, the day trippers parting around her, without knowing why. And Elliot stepped forward, and bent and kissed her powdered cheek, and she suffered it, and then held him off at arm's length by one lapel, the gray linen, Nora saw, the shoulder sitting true, and looked at him for a long moment. You've slept badly, Vivian said. I've been busy, grandmother. You've been lying awake. There's a difference, and I taught it to you. She released the lapel, and then, without turning her head, as if Nora were a fact she'd catalogued from the boat, and this is the bride I'm told materialized in a fortnight. Come here, girl, into the light. I don't buy anything I can't see. Nora went. She'd been going into difficult women's light her whole life. Brides and mothers of brides and dowagers who wanted a season's weight taken off a gown without a single stitch showing. And she went now the same way, unhurried, chin level, and stopped an arm's length from Vivian Vance and let herself be seen. The pale gray eyes went over her once. The sandals, good ones, June had insisted, not the everyday. The let-out linen. The pin scarred hands Nora did not hide. And last, unerring as Sloane's had been, the ring, riding openly now on the fourth finger of her left hand, the old rose gold warm against her skin, the little nest of leaves. Vivian's face did not change, but her hand came up, and she took Nora's fingers in her own dry, cool ones, surprisingly strong, a builder's grip under the powder, and turned the ring to the light, and Nora's whole body went still as a held breath. "Take it off," Vivian said. "Grandmother, take it off. I want to read it." The gray eyes flicked up to Nora's, bright and terrible and not unkind, which was the worst of it. "She always makes them read the inscription, doesn't she?" "Sloane will have told you that. Sloane tells everyone that. So you'll have practiced." A thin smile. "Read it to me, girl, my mother's ring. Read me what it says, and let me watch your face while you do." And there it was, the whole thing narrowed to a point no wider than a worn line of gold, the shop and the hotel and the paper over her heart. Everything Sloane had promised on the terrace, come due a full week early on a sunlit landing, with the day trippers laughing 30 feet away. Nora slid the ring from her finger. It came off warm. She held it up to the clean blue light, and she did not read the ghost of the letters, because she'd read them once on her own cutting table and never needed to again. "To the one who stays," she said. Vivian watched her face the whole time. Nora let her. She thought of the mother who went for a season, and the man who didn't keep her, and every hem she'd ever let out for a bride, more loved than she'd been, and she didn't perform any of it. She just let it be true behind her eyes, the way it was true, and let the old woman look. For a long moment, nobody on the landing breathed. A gull went over. The boat's engine idled. Vivian said at last, and let go of Nora's hand, and something had moved in the pale gray eyes that Nora couldn't read, and wasn't sure Vivian had meant to let her see. "Put it back on. You'll do for the boat landing. Dinner is another country." She turned, stick-tapping, and started up toward the hotel, and threw back over her shoulder, dry as sand, Elliot. "She has better hands than you deserve, and better nerve than your father ever had." "Which tells me nothing yet, except that you've chosen well or chosen cleverly, and I have never in my life been able to tell those two apart until the soup." And then she was gone up the green lawn on Marjorie's arm, and Nora stood on the landing with the ring back on her finger and her knees informing her, belatedly, that they'd been water the whole time. "You said the inscription," Elliot murmured beside her, "like you meant it." "I did mean it," Nora said, before she could stop herself, and slid the ring firmly down to the knuckle where it belonged, and did not look at him. "Don't. The soup, apparently, is another country. Let's go lose the hotel there instead." They very nearly won it. That was the thing Nora would come back to, afterward, how close they came, how the long dining room with its open windows and its salt and candle wax air, and its table dressed in the family linen, had, for a whole hour, tipped their way. Vivian at the head, Elliot at her right, Nora beside him, their hands twice brushing on the cloth, in a way Nora let happen because it read true and refused to admit read true for any other reason. Grant across from them, and he was exactly as advertised, golden and easy and delighted, a man who filled a room the way warm water fills a tub, and who toasted the engagement with such open-faced generosity that Nora almost missed the second toast folded inside it. To Elliot, Grant said, glass up, who's kept this news so beautifully quiet, not a word to any of us. Not a whisper all spring, a warm laugh around the table. One almost wonders when he found the time to fall in love, he's so rarely seen doing anything but the accounts. But then, the glass tilted toward Nora. Gracious, lethal, here's the proof of it, and lovelier than the accounts, so we forgive him the secrecy. To the happy secret. To the happy secret the table murmured, and Nora drank, and understood that she had just been complimented into a corner, a whirlwind nobody witnessed, a bride nobody had met. A love story with no witnesses but the two people who profited from it. Grant had laid the whole doubt out on the table dressed as a blessing, and Vivian, at the head, had watched him do it over the rim of her glass and said nothing, which was worse than if she'd said everything. Sloane, 3 seats down, in something the color of a bruise going pale, said nothing either. She only watched Nora, and waited, and picked at a roll, and Nora felt the weight more than any of the talk. They came through the fish. They came through Vivian's flat interrogations. Where had they met? How had he asked her? What did she make of the hotel? They came so close. Nora could feel it. The table warming to her, the old woman's hunting eyes softening a half-degree, Elliot beside her loosening for the first time in 3 days. And then Sloane set down her roll. "Vivian," she said pleasantly, into a lull, "you must have Nora tell you how she found the ring. It's the most romantic part, and Elliot's far too modest to tell it." She smiled down the table, sweet as the sugar smell that meant a fire was already lit. "Go on, Nora. Tell her how you came to be wearing her mother's ring. Tell her where you found it." The room went quiet. Nora felt Elliot go rigid beside her. Felt, very clearly, the trap close, because there was no version of the true story that didn't end in a breast pocket and a courier's rack and a ring that had been lost. Out of the very hand that was supposed to have been putting it on her, and Vivian Vance was already turning her pale gray builder's eyes down the table with a new and terrible attention, and saying, in a voice gone soft and cold as the tide going out, "Yes, do tell me, girl, where exactly did you find my mother's ring?" Nora set her fork down. She did it slowly, because her hands wanted to be steady, and steady hands were the only thing she had left to bring to this table, and she folded them in her lap over the family linen and looked down its long candlelit length at the small terrible woman at the head of it. The dining room had gone the particular quiet of a place where everyone has decided at once to pretend they aren't listening. Out the open windows the harbor was going violet, the last of the day, trippers' boats mumbling home, and the salt came in warm over the candle wax and the good bread and the green sharp thread of Sloane's perfume 3 seats down. Somewhere in the kitchen a pan was set down hard. Nora heard all of it, the way you hear everything in the second before a scene gives. She could feel Elliot beside her drawing breath to save her. She put her hand flat on his sleeve under the table, once, and he stopped. "I found it in a pocket," Nora said. Vivian's pale eyes did not move. A pocket. The breast pocket of a gray linen jacket. "That one." She nodded at Elliot's shoulder, at the seam she'd built true with her own hands 2 nights ago. "It came to my shop on a courier's rack with a season's worth of your family's suits to be let out for the ball. I put my hand in the pocket out of habit. You always check the pockets. Or you sew a man's forgotten cufflink into his own hem, and he never trusts you again. And there it was, wrapped in a handkerchief. Your mother's ring. Lost, she held the old woman's gaze and did not blink. He didn't put it on my finger, Mrs. Vance. He lost it weeks ago, and I found it, and I brought it back." The candle flame stood up straight in the still room. Grant's easy face had gone very carefully blank. Sloane had stopped picking at her roll. "You brought it back," Vivian repeated. "I called the hotel the same hour. Marjorie can tell you. I walked it up the boardwalk in the heat because a woman on the telephone told me not to trust it to a courier, and I put it in your grandson's hand across the concierge desk and told him it was home and I'd see myself out." Nora's voice did not rise. It was her grandmother's pinning voice. flat and calm over a gown that had to be finished by morning. That's where I found your mother's ring, in a pocket, on its way to my needle, because he'd lost the one thing he couldn't replace, and I'm the sort of fool who returns things. Nobody spoke. Down the table, Sloane's mouth had opened very slightly, because this was not the answer she'd loaded the gun with. She'd expected a lie to catch Nora on, and Nora had handed her the truth instead and taken all the powder out of it. And then, Vivian said, "Softer now, more dangerous. He asked you to wear it. Then he asked me to wear it." Nora did not look at Elliot. If she looked at Elliot, she would lose the flat calm, and she needed it for another 30 seconds. Yes, the word sat in the middle of the table like a dropped stitch, and Nora waited for the whole thing to unravel from it. The shop, the paper over her heart, the hotel, all of it, and found distantly that she was not sorry. She had returned a great many things in her life she could have kept. She was not going to start keeping a lie in front of an 80-year-old woman who'd built a hotel out of a bathhouse and could plainly see straight through candle smoke. Grant recovered first. He always would. "Well," he said warmly, reaching for the wine, "there it is. A ring lost, a stranger paid to wear it. Grandmother, I do think we've had our answer, and I'm only sorry it came dressed as dinner." "There's no shame in it, Elliot, truly. A man in a corner does what I wasn't paid to wear it," Nora said. Grant paused, the bottle tipped over his glass. "I was paid to save my shop." She turned her hand palm up on the cloth, the rose gold catching the candlelight, the little nest of leaves. "That's a different thing, and you'd know the difference, Mr. Vance, if you'd ever once had a thing small enough to lose." Bell and daughter. A narrow shop between a fudge kitchen and a shut-up bait store, named for my grandmother and me. And it goes under this autumn if one season runs slow. He offered to keep it standing. I said I'd stand next to him for 3 weeks so an old woman he loves wouldn't be lied to by her other grandson over long lunches at the junction. The candle flames leaned as a breath of harbor air came through. So no, not paid to wear a ring, paid to keep a door locked at night that's mine. And I'd have told you all of it before the soup if anyone at this table had asked me a question instead of springing me a trap. Sloane made a small sound, not a word, just air, and looked down at her plate. Vivian Vance began, very quietly, to laugh. It was not a kind laugh, and it was not an unkind one. It was the dry, delighted, disbelieving laugh of a woman who has been trying to catch someone in a lie for an hour and been handed, instead, something she had genuinely not expected, which at her age was rarer than the ring. She set down her glass. She put one dry, ringless hand flat on the linen, and looked down the whole length of her own table at the girl in the let-out dress with the pin-scarred hands. And the laugh went out of her slowly, and left something behind it that made even Grant sit back. 40 years, Vivian said. People have sat at this table and told me what they thought I wanted to hear. Bankers, my own son, God rest his charming uselessness. This one, a tilt of the silver head at Grant, tells me a beautiful thing every Tuesday and means the half of it that helps him. And a girl off the boardwalk who owes me nothing sits in my dining room with my mother's ring on her hand and a trap sprung under her and tells me the truth when a good lie would have served her better. She lifted her glass an inch. Do you know what that is, girl? At my age? No, Mrs. Vance, a novelty. She drank. And I have bought a great many things in my life, but I have never once managed to buy a novelty. They don't sell them. You have to fall over them in a pocket. She set the glass down, and her eyes went, finally, hard and bright, to her grandson. Elliot, grandmother, you lied to me. 3 weeks ago, in the yellow drawing room, you told me you had a bride, and you did not, and you sent to your grandfather's tailor's granddaughter? No. Don't correct me. I know exactly whose shop that is. I've been having Marjorie's hems seen to there for 20 years without your ever noticing where your own family's trousers go. And you built me a bride out of a lost ring and a frightened shopgirl's mortgage. Her voice did not lift, but it sharpened to a point. That was a contemptible thing to do to her. And a stupid thing to do to me. You know what I do to people who manage me. I do, Elliot said. He had gone pale. But he did not draw the curtains this time. Nora, watching him from the side, saw him leave them open on purpose, and something in her chest turned over. You should give it to Grant. I lied, and she's told you I lied, and there's your answer, and it's the right one. Elliot, Nora started. No. He turned to her, and there was nothing managed in his face at all now, nothing careful, only the plain wreck of a man setting something down. You told the truth up this whole table when a lie would have saved your shop, and I'll not sit here and let you be the only honest Vance at a Vance table. It wasn't a Vance table anyway, until you sat down at it. He looked back at his grandmother. Give Grant the hotel. I broke faith to keep it, and that's disqualifying, and we both know it. But the paper stands. Her shop's clear, whatever you decide. I signed it independent of any of this, in ink, before she agreed to a single thing, and that's the one clause tonight I'm proud of. The room held its breath. Grant, Nora saw, had gone still in a new way, the golden ease gone flat. A man who has just watched his cousin hand him the prize and understood, too late and too publicly, that being handed it this way was worse than losing it. And then Sloane stood up. She did it quietly, her chair barely scraping, and every head turned. Because Sloane, in a room the color of a fading bruise, had been the loaded gun all evening, and now she was on her feet with everyone watching and no one able to guess which way she'd fire. "Oh, sit down, all of you," Sloane said, and her cut-glass voice had a crack running clean through it that she wasn't troubling to hide any more. "I can't bear it. I truly can't." She pressed 2 fingers to her mouth, dropped them. "Vivian, I'm going to tell you something, and then I'm going to go home, and you're never going to have me at your dreadful, beautiful ball again. Which is fine. I've been coming to it since I was 6, and it's always been too cold on that lawn." She drew a breath. "I told Nora on the terrace that Elliot does a thing where he gives you a small, sad, true story, so you won't ask about the large one. I said it to frighten her off. It's true, he does do it, but the thing is, I was the large one. I was the story he wasn't telling her. And I came here tonight to help Grant sink him. Because Elliot ended something between us badly, and I have spent a month wanting to be in the room when he lost the thing he loved." Her chin came up, the poise reassembling even as her voice frayed. "And I've sat here for an hour watching a shop girl tell the truth into a trap I helped build. And I find I'd rather not be the sort of person I flew up here to be." So she looked at Vivian, and then, with visible effort, at Nora. "Grant got to you at the junction. Vivian, he moved your train. He's been planning this dinner since spring, the toast, the ring question, all of it. He asked me to spring the pocket. I said yes, because I was hurt, and it made me small. That's the large story. Now I'm going to go be sick about it in the car." She put her napkin on the table, precisely the way Nora had once set a ring down on a concierge desk, and she walked the length of the room on heels that found no loose board because there wasn't one, and at the door she stopped without turning. "The inscription's worth a great deal, Miss Bell," she said to the doorframe. In case anyone still hasn't told you, I never did manage to be the one who stays. I hope you do better." And then she was gone, and the green, sharp smell of her went with her, out into the summer dark. The silence she left behind had weight. A moth had found the candles and bumped them softly. Out on the water a late boat sounded its horn, and another answered it, far off. And Vivian Vance sat at the head of her table, with her ringless hands folded, and looked for a long moment at nothing at all. Then she turned to Grant. "You moved my train," she said. Grant opened his handsome mouth. Whatever charm he reached for wasn't there. Nora watched him grope for it in the ruins, the way a man pats a pocket he already knows is empty. "Grandmother, Sloane is upset. She's not. You moved my train. And you built a dinner to break your cousin in front of me. And you toasted a girl you meant to humiliate before the fish." Vivian's voice never rose. That was the terror of it. "I have watched you charm your way out of 3 ventures and into my will, and I have let you. Because a woman my age likes to be charmed, and I thought it cost me nothing." She picked up her stick from where it leaned against the table and set both hands atop it. "It cost me the pleasure of being surprised at my own table." "You've had my affection for 40 years, Grant, and you've never once given me a novelty. Go home. We'll speak about the hotel when I can look at you without wanting to change tailors." Grant stood. For a moment the room braced for the golden man to say something golden, and Nora almost pitied him, the way she'd pitied Sloane on the terrace. A man who'd been handsome and easy his whole life in a family that rewarded it, and had never once been asked to be more, and so had never learned how. He looked at Elliot. He looked longest at Nora, at the pin-scarred hands and the borrowed nerve, and something crossed his face that might, in a better man, have grown up one day into shame. "Congratulations," he said to no one, and left. And then it was only the 3 of them, and the moth, and the candles, and the harbor breathing through the open windows. And Vivian Vance let out a long breath, and, all at once, looked her 80 years. "Well," she said, "that's my ball ruined a week early, and half my family sent home before the pudding. I hope you're both satisfied. But there was no heat in it." She looked at Elliot, and her hard face did something it clearly had not done in a long while, and had trouble remembering the shape of. It softened. "You handed it to him. You'd have let Grant have the whole of it, rather than let her sit here as the only honest one. When did you learn to do that, Elliot? You didn't get it from your father, and you certainly didn't get it from me." 3 days ago, Elliot said. "In a linen room. From a woman who took my grandfather's jacket apart at the shoulder and told me it had been asking a question my whole life that nobody ever answered." Nora looked at the table. Vivian looked between them for a long, shrewd, unhurried moment, the way she'd looked at the ring on the landing, a builder pricing the true weight of a thing under its finish. Then she planted her stick and got to her feet, waving off Elliot's hand. "I'm old, I'm tired, and I've decided something, which is the only thing that still gives me any pleasure," she announced. "The hotel is Elliot's. Not because he produced a bride, he produced a fraud, and I'll thank neither of you to forget I know it. He gets it, because when the trap closed, he tried to give it away rather than let an honest woman stand in the fire alone. That is the single most Rosewater thing anyone in this family has done since I laid the first course of brick." She started for the door, stick-tapping, then stopped beside Nora's chair and looked down at her. And the pale hunting gray had gone, unmistakably, warm, A's for you. She reached out one dry, strong hand and turned Nora's, palm up, the ring catching the last of the candles. "You'll give that back to him when your 3 weeks are up, I expect. The paper says shop clear, whatever happens, and I've no doubt he meant it. So you owe this family nothing, and you can walk down that boardwalk tomorrow, a free woman with your door locked behind you." Her grip tightened, just slightly, the builder's grip Nora had felt on the landing. "But I've buried a husband and a son, and outlived every person who ever once told me the truth. And I have learned exactly one thing worth the trouble of 80 years, girl. So I'll give it to you for nothing, and you may do with it as you like." Her voice dropped, for Nora alone, though Elliot was 2 feet away and not breathing. "The ring doesn't ask whether you were paid. It never has. It asks one question, and it only asks the once. Mind you're honest about your answer. I wasn't the first time I was asked, and it cost me 30 years. She let go. "Good night, Marjorie's aired my rooms. Don't either of you dare thank me. I can't abide it." And she went, small and upright and terrible, out into the corridor on the tapping of her stick, and left the two of them alone in the candlelight, with the harbor coming in through the windows, and the whole impossible thing suddenly, silently, won. For a moment, neither of them moved. Nora looked at the ring on her own hand. "To the one who stays." Her thumb found the worn letters without her asking it to, the old bruise underneath pressing up the way it had on her cutting table 3 days and a whole lifetime ago. "So," she said, and was appalled to hear her voice not quite level. "You have your hotel. The shop's clear. Sloane's gone off to be honest in a car. Grant's been sent home without pudding, and your grandmother likes me." Which I did not see coming. She stood up too fast, gathering nothing, because there was nothing to gather, only the sudden need to be doing something with her hands. "That's the job done, then. That's the whole 3 weeks in one dinner." "I should." She reached for the ring. "Nora, give this back. That's the arrangement," she said it herself, clean and no strings. "You go back to never thinking about the alterations shop, and I go back to Nora." She stopped. He'd stood, too. The candlelight was warm on the true shoulder of his grandfather's jacket, and on the not sleeping in his face, and he was looking at her the way he'd looked at her in the linen room when she'd found where he carried his weight, the careful, dangerous, almost relief. Except that all the caution had finally, entirely, gone out of it. "Don't take it off," he said. "Please." "That's the second time you've said that to me across a piece of that woman's furniture." Her hands had started to shake, and she hated them for it. "It was a business arrangement, Elliot. You have the paper. I have the paper. We agreed no version of you 3 months from now who thinks I'm still on his ledger. Those were my words. You agreed so fast I frowned at you. I agreed fast because it was fair, and I've spent my whole life in rooms where nothing's fair, and I'd have agreed to anything you asked me on that terrace to keep you standing on it." He took a step around the table. The moth bumped the candle. Out the window, a horn answered the dark. "And then you took my grandfather's jacket apart and told me why it never sat right. And you told me about a mother who went for a season, and a man who thought a woman who could fix everything wasn't worth keeping. And you said, don't make it about me. It's a business arrangement. In exactly the too fast voice I use when I'm closing a door I've already left open. And I heard it. And I've been standing on the wrong side of that door for 3 days, telling myself I heard wrong. Elliot, you said your half was a wife who knew how I take my coffee and where I carry my weight, and what my grandfather's jacket means. He was close now, close enough that she could smell the linen and the candle wax, and, under it, him. You gave me all 3. And somewhere in the middle of the 3rd I stopped counting them as your half of a job, and started. He stopped. Drew a breath. Left the curtains open. I'm no good at this. I proposed to Sloane with a spreadsheet, and I insulted you with a checkbook inside 11 minutes of the best thing that's ever walked into that lobby. I don't have a speech. I have a jacket that finally fits, and a grandmother who likes you, and a hotel I'd trade tomorrow for you to take that ring off because you wanted to keep it. Not because the 3 weeks are up. The room was very quiet. Nora's heart was going hard, and her hands, she noticed distantly, had gone perfectly steady. The way they always went steady the instant a job turned out to be the biggest one anyone had ever handed her. I have spent my whole life, she said, and her voice came out low and even and true, being the one who's left. The one who does the fixing and gets the mending pile. I let out other women's gowns so they'd look more loved than they were, and I locked my shop at night and told myself useful was the same as wanted, because it was safer than finding out it wasn't. She looked down at the ring, then up at him. And then a stranger folded my fingers closed around his grandmother's ring and asked me to wear the one thing I've never once been told, and some starved, stubborn corner of me wanted to say yes for no reason at all. I've been furious at that corner for 3 days. Nora, I'm not finished. The candle flames leaned. The inscription doesn't ask whether you were paid. She's right. It asks one thing, and it asks it once. She drew a breath that shook only a little. So ask me, Elliot, not for the hotel. It's yours already. Not for the shop. It's clear either way. You saw to that yourself. Ask me the way the ring asks, and mind you don't do it too fast, because I'll hear it. He didn't do it too fast. He took her hand, the ringed one, warm rose gold and pin-scarred knuckles both. And he held it the flat, careful way he'd held the ring across Marjorie's desk the first morning. A man holding the only thing in 3 weeks he actually wanted. And he said, very low, with the curtains all the way open and nothing managed left in him at all, stay. Just the one word. The sharpest line in the whole long dinner. And he gave it to her plain, no wind-up, no speech. The way she'd read the inscription on the landing, let it be true behind his eyes and let her look. Nora Bell, who had walked into the Rosewater Hotel to give a ring back, closed her hand around his so the little nest of leaves pressed its small pattern into both their palms at once. And she did not take the ring off, then or ever. Yes, she said, for no reason at all. Which is the only good reason there's ever been. Outside, the last boat found the harbor, and the summer dark came warm through the open windows, and somewhere down the corridor an old woman who could not abide being thanked was allowing herself, alone, a small and private and entirely un-Rosewater smile. They were married on the lawn above the water at the end of August, which everyone agreed was a scandal of short notice, and no one, having seen Vivian Vance stand up unaided at the reception to declare it the only interesting thing the family had done in a decade, dared say so twice. It was not the Rose Ball. The Rose Ball had come and gone 3 weeks before. White linen on the green, and the whole town craning to see the shopgirl on Elliot Vance's arm. And Nora had walked into it in a gown she'd cut, and sewn herself over 4 sleepless nights. The plainest dress on the lawn, and the only one that fit its wearer, as though it had grown there. She had danced one dance under Vivian's eye, and not put a foot wrong, and June. In the corner by the champagne, with a look of ferocious vindication, had leaned to Marjorie and said, "That's my work, the shoulders." Well, his shoulders are hers, the rest is mine. And Marjorie had laughed until her beaded chain shook. The wedding was smaller and better. The fudge kitchen sent up a ridiculous tiered thing that smelled of burnt sugar, and made Nora cry for reasons she couldn't explain to anyone but June, who understood without being told. The bait store 2 doors down from Bell and Daughter had reopened that month under a young couple's hands, so Harbor Lane no longer smelled of anything shut up. And Nora had a lease on the wall of her shop with independent of the outcome of any family determination inked into it, framed June's insistence, so I can point at it when I say I told you so, except I have to say I told you it'd work, which is a disappointment I'll carry bravely. Nora kept the shop. That surprised the town more than the wedding had. She was Mrs. Vance now, or would be by the pudding, and Mrs. Vance could have hung up her seam ripper and never let out another waistband in her life, and instead she was at Bell and Daughter 6 mornings a week, with the Flatirons propping the windows and June at the press and the salt air moving the muslin, because the shop was the one thing she'd built with her own 2 hands out of other people's forgotten hems. And she had learned from a woman who built a hotel out of a bathhouse and a bad loan that you do not hand away the thing you made yourself, not for anything, not even for happiness. You could work upstairs at the hotel, Elliot said once, early, watching her thread a needle by the propped window. Better light. Better chairs. A door that locks. I have a door that locks. She bit the thread. You put it in writing, and I've seen your better chairs. They're for people who've never had to be tired in front of anyone. This chair's honest. She looked up at him over the wedding gown, pinned to the form like a patient mid-surgery, and there it was, the dry, warm thing she'd taught him in the linen room, and he'd finally learned to aim. Besides, somebody has to fix your family's trousers before the ball. Grant's still listing to port in that one leg I did wrong the day you insulted me. I've decided to leave it. It's a monument. Elliot laughed. The real one. The whole one. The one that used to be gone before it finished. And now, these days, stayed. He'd learned to make one small joke by then, and Nora made a great show of being astonished at the novelty every single time, which was itself the joke. The private shorthand of 2 people who'd built a marriage out of a lost ring and a linen room and a grandmother's one honest lesson. Vivian gave them the hotel and kept, as she put it, the exact amount of it I intend to enjoy watching you both fail to ruin. She came to Sunday dinners and told the truth without mercy, and adored Nora with a ferocity she disguised as criticism. And once, only once, near the end of a long warm evening, with the harbor going violet through the windows, she took Nora's hand and turned the ring to the last of the light and read the ghost of the letters aloud herself. "To the one who stays," the old woman said, and her hunting gray eyes were, for once, not hunting anything at all. "My mother had it cut for my father before I was thought of. He stayed. She stayed. It skipped a generation of us who didn't know how. And it sat in a dark pocket waiting, and it came out on the hand of a girl who walked it back up a boardwalk in July when she could have kept it and told no one." She patted Nora's knuckles, the builder's grip gone gentle. "I told you the ring asks one question once. I never told you it also answers one. Yours is answered, child. You were never the one who was left. You were the one who kept giving the thing back until the right person finally asked you to keep it." She let go and reached for her stick and was entirely Vivian again before the sentence had cooled. "Now this pudding is a disgrace, and I intend to say so to the kitchen personally." Sloane sent a card. That autumn, cream, expensive, a hand that slanted hard across it, though nothing like Vivian's. "Wishing you both the thing I couldn't manage," it said. "Mind you're better at it than I was." And under that, smaller, the inscription was always going to be about someone. "I'm glad it turned out to be you, and not another season of me." She did not sign it kisses. She signed it, simply. Sloane and Nora kept the card in the teacup by the bed where the ring had spent its one uncertain night, and did not throw it away, because she knew what it was to be the angry one nobody ever fit, and she had never once been afraid of that woman, only sorry, which was the more dangerous thing to be. On a flat blue morning the following July, a year, near enough, to the day the courier had honked twice outside a narrow shop that smelled of hot linen and sea, Nora Bell propped the front windows with her grandmother's 2 flat irons and set the ceiling fan turning, and pinned a wedding gown to the form. And June came in backward, hauling the season's first rack of the Rosewater suits with the little rose stamp on every bag. "He honks," June said, jerking her head at the departing van, "like the honking'll make the seams let out faster. 3 summers, I've told him. 4 now. It's a tradition. It's practically folklore." She hung the rack and stood back and looked at it, then at Nora, and her sharp young face went, for just a moment, soft. "You still check the pockets?" "Every one." Nora slid her hand into the breast pocket of a slate gray linen jacket, worn soft at the inside cuff where a wrist had rubbed it 1,000 times, and found it empty, and smiled, and did not mind at all. You never know what somebody's gone and lost. Out past the propped window, the boardwalk was waking, sunscreen and fried dough and radios and the green mineral tang of the tide going out. And a little girl ran by trailing a kite that finally, this year, flew, and waved at the shop as though at an old friend. Nora waved back. The salt air moved the muslin. The fudge kitchen next door hit its mid-morning boil, and the sweet burnt smell came thickening through the walls of Bell and Daughter. Where the door locked at night, and it was hers, and where the woman inside it wore an old rose gold ring with a small warm star at its heart that had wandered a long way to be lost, and a long way back to find the one who stays. Thank you for spending this summer on Harbor Lane with Nora and Elliot. If this story warmed something in you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Adrian Romance Stories. So you'll be here for the next one, and tell me in the comments, would you have given the ring back or kept it? I read every answer. Until the next story, take good care of yourself, and remember that the people worth keeping are the ones who ask you to stay.